Hey, everyone who's currently joining us. Thanks for jumping on tonight. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to file in, and then we'll get started here. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jesse Moose, to kick off our meeting tonight.
All right, thank you, Nick. Everyone, it is Monday night, 6 p.m. Welcome to our third construction meeting for the SpringHill sewer separation. Slide, please. First thing we want to note is this meeting is being recorded. It will be put on our website, hopefully by the end of this week for future viewings. We'll do usually, because we are in, this is a ward specific project, we would have the ward counselor make a little introduction about the project, but unfortunately, the counselor is double booked. So Counselor Ben Ewing-Campen is actually, as the president of the council, is also part of the school committee. And tonight they are voting on a new superintendent. So he's actually at that meeting and gives his regards and wishes you all well. So the agenda for tonight's meeting, you're going to meet the project team, the three of us, who you should probably know by now, unless this is your first meeting, and we'll go over a brief summary of the work. We're going to discuss the work completed to date, catch you up on everything from our last meeting in November to today. We're going to look at the upcoming work, look ahead really for 2023, and then some spoilers and some hints for 2024. Talk about streetscape restoration and the bike network connection that we made from Central Street and Summer Street, and also some green infrastructure that you'll see as part of the Summer Street project. And then at the end, we'll go over some FAQs and how to reach out to us with questions in the future. Next slide, please. So these three gents you're looking at are the people who deal with this project the most. I'll introduce myself first. I'm the construction liaison with the city of Somerville. I've been with the city for 13 years. You'll also hear from Dan Emlin, the project manager, who is almost celebrating its 5th year with the city. You get a special vest like Saturday Night Live, I've heard. And then Nick Aleco, who joined us last year. No vest for you yet. Next slide, please. Our contractor for the project is Gioso. They have oversight from design and construction by Stantec. And then our green infrastructure and plantings are overseen by Hatch. Next slide, please. So I imagine if you're in this meeting, you understand the limits of work that's in your neighborhood. So let me just quickly go over it. We're doing work on Summer Street from Spring Street to Bow Street, Central Street from Summer Street to Highland, School Street from Summer Street to Highland, then Highland Ave from Central to Hamlet. And I just want to take a moment to kind of address the scuttlebutt about Highland Ave. I saw some social media posts about what they think this meeting is about, for or negative. This is not a meeting to talk about streetscape improvements for Highland Ave. This is a utility work only project for Highland Ave. We are in the process of completing the Central to School Street work. Dan's going to talk more about from school to Hamlet in this presentation, but this work that we're doing is not streetscape improvement. It does not permanently remove parking. It is not to put a new bike lane in. That is a future project that is not part of this. I just want to make that very clear as we go forward. Hopefully that will save some questions. And, obviously you can still ask questions about Highland, but this project does not relate to those kind of streetscape improvements or removal of parking. Next slide, please.
Before we jump to the next slide, Jesse, I just want to remind everyone here, good evening, Dan Emlin, project manager. We're about halfway through this project already. So I think that's an important piece of information to note here before we kind of get into the meat of what this meeting's about. Quickly, as you can see on the screen here, the project was awarded November 1st of 2021. We successfully made it through our first year of construction. We're now entering our second year. Final completion, and I'm sure a lot of you are interested in hearing this, is actually November 30th, 2024. So as we kind of get into the spring season, into summer, we've got roughly about 1.5 years left. For those who are interested, this project was bid at just over $23 million, or rather a hair under $24 million. And to date, we've spent almost $8 million just on utility work alone on just a handful of streets. So with that, I'm going to move to the next slide here. So for those who haven't joined us in the past, this is our third construction meeting for this project. For those of you who weren't able to attend the first or second meeting, or weren't able to follow up on the city's website to view those presentations, I'll very quickly give you a quick description of what the intent of this project is. Many of you already know this, but when the city was being developed back in the 1800s, they used what's called the one pipe system. One pipe meaning it carried both stormwater and sanitary flows. That practice is long since outdated. However, so are all of our current utilities. So one of the overarching goals of this project is to separate sanitary from stormwater flows. We have what's called combined sewers. What's in the name? So this project is actually a continuation of kind of a consortium of other projects, notably Somerville Avenue and the Pollard Street Pump Station. Those being the lowest points in the city, they carry 60% of the city's flows. So we're kind of continuing the same effort further upstream into the SpringHill neighborhood. In addition to separating stormwater and sanitary, building new drains, building new sewers, rehabilitating existing sewers, we're replacing a lot of old aging water mains. I've got a pretty cool photo to show a lot of you what's been underground here for the last 120 years. And then we'll kind of shift over and talk more about surface work, surface restoration, streetscape improvements. And a lot of it's going to be focused on green stormwater infrastructure. It's a really exciting new direction we're going in as a city by incorporating all these green stormwater infrastructure features. And lastly, some mobility improvements. So with that being said, for a lot of you who have joined us in the past, we tend to kind of give you a brief overlook of what's been done to date. How do we spend that $7.75 million? Obviously, as time's gone on, we've spent more money, we've done more work, and what I'm about to show you is kind of a street-by-street breakdown of the work completed to date, basically from when the project was awarded up until today. I won't go through every single quantity. It's a lot of metrics for those who are interested. I won't go through every single thing. I don't want to lose all of your attention quite yet. So I'll point out some features on different streets, some things that are out of the ordinary, and we'll make our way through it. So we're going to start with Avon Street. This is actually one of the streets here in the next couple of slides that has seen a lot of work. And for those of you joining us from Avon Street, thank you for your patience. So you can kind of see on each of these streets, highlighting storm drain pipe that's been installed, the number of manholes, catch basins that's been installed, sewer mains, new sewer mains, I should say, that have been installed underground, manholes. And this next one's pretty cool for those who aren't aware. CIPP line sewer stands for cured in place pipe. Basically what that is a big fiberglass sock gets pulled through an existing sewer line and it gets inflated with steam. When it cures almost like concrete. So in essence, we're creating a new pipe within an existing sewer pipe. The purpose of that is to extend the longevity of our pipes by hopefully another 50 to 100 years. So we've actually managed to line maybe half of the sewers that the contract calls for. We've still got roughly half of the sewers within the project limits still to go. So that's something that will be occurring hopefully here this spring and summer. Another neat feature about Avon Street, you'll see at the bottom of the list, or second to bottom, is asbestos pipe removed. This pipe was used for our fire alarm. It's an underground fire alarm conduit. It's an old transite pipe. Transite is just another word for asbestos. This was installed 50, 60, 70 years ago. The reason we had it removed was because we need to replace water services. We need to replace occasional sewer lateral to your home. And when we replace those, they're perpendicular to this asbestos pipe, which ran along the southern sidewalk. It's a very, very fragile pipe. For those who aren't aware, asbestos, it's a carcinogen, it's known. We actually decided, rather than try to cross underneath these and run the risk of having this pipe fracture into particles, we decided to remove it in its entirety. So those of you who live on Avon Street, you've obviously seen the southern sidewalk is currently asphalt. That is the result of us removing this pipe. One other thing worth mentioning, and I've got to give all the credit to Jesse Moose. He's worked with Eversource Electric pretty extensively here over the past, I guess, year and a half, having double utility poles removed. It's not something we often talk about, mostly because we don't do that work. It falls back on these third-party utility companies. So Jesse's been an actual champion in holding them accountable to remove these. There's redundancy in having two poles.
Also, you want to talk about the sidewalks we're going to do in the next couple weeks and why that we had them removed for the sidewalks?
Well, in the next couple of weeks, we're actually on Avon Street specifically. We're going to be constructing all new sidewalks, both sides of the road. It's going to start with installing curbing, getting the road paved with the first lift of pavement. There's 3 different lifts. They call them base, binder, and top. So we'll actually be paving Avon Street curb to curb with the first lift or 2, I forget which. Then they're going to shift gears and start putting in new granite curbing and pouring new concrete sidewalks. In an effort to not only make it look better, but it's restoring what was there. They will be ADA compliant, as we aim to do here in the city for mobility purposes. So those of you on Avon Street, well, we've got some exciting work coming up here very soon. Next is Berkeley Street, a lot of the same information. And I'll slowly flip through these for those who live on these streets. Cambria Street, we've done quite a bit of work. Same with Carter Terrace. It's a very small side street off Summer Street. You wouldn't believe how much we've put into that. It's very small side street, which is good. This is our goal. Moving on, Central Street. Many of you know we spent quite a bit of time there last year. Occasionally had some work to do over the winters, more so up at the Highland Ave intersection. Highland Ave, well, I speak of it. So many of you know we've been working on Highland Ave almost exclusively over the winter. It was a great opportunity for our contractor to continue working, even during cold weather, during snow. The focus on Highland Ave, and as Jesse mentioned earlier, this project doesn't have any streetscape component to it for Highland Ave. The only work we have in our scope with our contractor is to replace the utilities. So as you can see, we've installed a lot of new storm drains, installed a lot of new drain manholes, catch basins, a little bit of sewer main, and quite a bit of new water main. As we go further through the presentation, I want to emphasize again that water main is very important, and you'll see why. Oxford Street, where our contractor is currently working, they're making great progress. They're on schedule. They'll be continuing to work on Oxford Street for the next couple of weeks here, installing new sewer mains, storm drains, and water mains. And lastly, Summer Street. I do want to note that this portion of Summer Street, all of these quantities you do see are between Spring Street and School Street. So we've essentially bisected Summer Street at School. There's the west half, which is what you're seeing now, and the east half, which we'll be getting into later this year. Eversource Gas has been working on the eastern portion of Summer Street between School Street and Bow Street, installing a new gas main. What is it, roughly 1,100 feet. And again, kudos to Jesse. We've got about 10 double utility poles removed, so now they're just single utility poles. And that's it in a nutshell. That's all the work we've done from the start of this project until now. A lot of good news here on this slide. Let's talk about trees. Many of you saw almost a year ago, we cut down a whole lot of trees. I think the actual number was maybe around 30. The good news is there's going to be a huge net gain of trees on this project. We'll be planting 185 new trees. It's likely they'll all be planted next year after after all of our utility work is complete and we're focused on streetscape restoration. We certainly don't want to plant any trees ahead of that and run the risk of damaging them before the project ends. So this is typically one of the last things to be installed during a project, or planted, I should say. And for those that are interested, I won't go through all these, but the 185 trees we're planting, all of the species, the types are listed here. So for those who are interested in the different types of trees, how many we're planting, this presentation is actually going to be posted on our city website. You can always come back and refer to these. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And now the most exciting part, what to expect here over the next, call it 6 to 9 months. I want to preface this by saying we will be having another fall 2023 construction community meeting. We'll speak very briefly to what's happening this fall. Obviously, just the industry, things are subject to change. We're here to give you the most accurate representation of what we plan to do. Obviously, as you get further out in the schedule, it's harder to kind of nail down exact dates, things like that. So we'll give you a preview of what to expect this fall, but we're going to come back in roughly 6 months anyway and provide another quick update. So that being said, here we are, spring 2023. This is where we'll be working. These are split up. The yellow color is underground utility work, slated to begin, if not already, or hasn't already begun. Here in April, I think School Street may start in May. But all the utility work that we still have to do includes Gibbon Street, Westwood Road, Oxford Street, Percy Street, and School Street. One thing that's not shown on here that I'll allude to in here in a second is what I just mentioned. Avon Street's actually the streetscape and surface restoration work's actually going to start in the next 2 to 3 weeks. In addition to that, we'll also have crews out on Summer Street, preparing the roadways, preparing sidewalks, curbs, etc. So we'll have a lot of work going on here over the next few months. And I'm sure many of you are curious, how does traffic work? As you all know, we've been working on Highland Ave. We've had a detour set up to allow eastbound traffic only. Westbound traffic has been detoured down School Street. The good news here is our contractor's working on completing all the water service installations to each individual building on that section of Highland between Central and School. That work will be coming to an end in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that detour will go away. And here's what our traffic pattern is, what we expect it to look like. This is what we're currently planning for, based on the traffic management plans that our contractor submits and the approvals they receive out of our office. As you can see, Highland Ave reverts back to two-way temporarily. We'll get into that in a second. Why temporarily is a key word here. But obviously with utility work happening on School Street, we can't send traffic down. It's a narrow road with parking on both sides of the street. It won't be able to accommodate vehicular traffic. Our goal instead is to send any southbound traffic, any vehicles, any cars, bicyclists that would normally go south on School Street down to Summer, we're going to detour down Prescott Street. Excuse me. Other than that, Central Street remains two-way. Summer Street's going to remain two-way. It'll typically be open during the restoration work. There may be instances, and again, we're not here to lie to you. We want to tell you the truth and be upfront. There are going to be times when Summer Street needs to close for various facets of their work. Paving, for instance, is going to be one of them. And when I say close, I mean to general traffic. Anyone that lives on Summer Street in this section shown on the screen, anyone that lives on Preston Road or Green Street or Carter Terrace or Laurel Street. We'll keep Summer Street open for local access and abutters. And I want everyone to almost take a sigh of relief that, we don't want to cut you off from your neighborhood. We want you to be able to get home, and we'll certainly do our best to make sure that happens. Will it be 100% of the time? To be honest, maybe not. But we're all humans. We want to do the best we can. And if there's certain areas where we can improve in, such as maintaining street access, we look to you all to let us know. We're not out there every day. We're not residents of the SpringHill neighborhood. So we encourage you to reach out to us if there are issues, if there's trouble getting home or getting out of your driveway. And certainly we'll do our part on our end to notify you all each and every time a major portion of work is expected to happen and anticipated to happen. Usually with 48 hours in advance, if not sooner, something we're still striving for. As we get into the summer, you'll notice the underground utility work, those yellow colors are slowly lessening. Our streetscape and surface restoration work is becoming more so. We're going to be installing new drain, new sewer, new water on Highland Ave between School Street and Hamlet Street. We deliberately worked with our contractor to schedule this work during the summer when school is no longer in session. Just like the section of Highland Ave we're on now, there will be instances where we need to temporarily remove parking in order to accommodate the work. Typically, they work from west to east, or a unilateral direction rather. So when we finish a certain area, say between School Street and Prescott Street, we can reinstate the parking as we move down the street so that we're not removing it for a month, 2 months on end. Our goal is to try to lessen these impacts to all of you as we progress. And the other portion of utility work is Summer Street. As I mentioned, Eversource Gas has been installing their new gas main. We haven't been able to work in that section of Summer Street yet. So for those of you on, call it Lower Summer Street by Nunziato Park, construction's not over. I apologize. We still have a lot of work to do. And as you can see, more surface and streetscape restoration improvements on Avon Street, Westwood Road, and Summer Street. We do not currently have a traffic pattern for the summer yet. It's still being worked out between our contractor, our traffic engineer, all three of us, the fire department. There's a lot of many sets of eyes that review these traffic management plans so that we can ensure, and implement what makes the most sense for residents, for commuters, for any employees of any businesses on Highland Avenue. So I apologize, we don't have that prepared for this evening. Even if we did, chances are it would be inaccurate. So,
But I mean, the good news, Dan, is that we're not planning to start the other portion of Highland Ave till school's out. So we have plenty of time to get that together, working with the shareholders you just spoke to. So you'll speak more to that, but just the other part of Highland Ave is not happening till at the earliest June. So we have time.
yes, thank you. Yep. So fret not, we'll finish the section of Highland Ave we're on now. Everyone on Highland Ave will have a bit of a reprieve here for at least a month, if not two. And we'll be back on the other side of School Street, as Jesse said, as early as June. And this is where we get into fall, and this is as accurate as we can be at the moment with our construction schedule. We'll still be wrapping up utility work on Summer Street. We're actually going to start some streetscape work on Central Street. For those who are unaware, the end of this project, Central Street becomes a one-way northbound road from Summer Street up to Highland Ave. The implementation of the one-way direction likely won't come until spring of 2024. We've got a lot of call it ancillary work. We've got 2 separated cycle tracks that are going to be installed on Central Street. We've got new sidewalks, new curbing, a lot of brick pavers. There's a couple historic granite posts over by the Somerville Museum that we need to reset. So we're going to try our best to get as much done in the fall, but like I said, chances are The same two-way traffic pattern that you're all used to now likely will continue through the winter until we get to springtime of next year. And the last piece I want to mention here is a new color. It's trench restoration. So as Jesse mentioned earlier, and sorry to disappoint those who thought we were going to be talking about Highland Ave streetscape this evening. This project doesn't include any streetscape elements for Highland Ave. The only portion of work we have in our scope is to restore all of the utility trenches that we're putting in now. So as you can tell, for those who have traveled on Highland Ave between Central and School, we've got a lot of different trenches in a lot of different directions. Come fall, we're going to be looking to smooth those out, replace a lot of temporary asphalt, and really try to make the roadway as best as we can within the limitations of our scope of work. So we won't be fully paving Highland Ave. We won't be reconstructing sidewalks. We won't be putting any plantings or curb bump outs, and we won't have any of that, fortunately. All of that will be reserved for this future Highland Ave streetscape project. Moving on, as I mentioned earlier, kind of towards the beginning of this presentation, the city has taken a proactive approach in reducing the amount of stormwater that gets into our sanitary systems. You all heard me earlier when I talked about combined sewers. All of those flows from our combined sewers go to the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. They have a treatment plant in Deer Island where we pay to treat this, call it wastewater. A lot of the treatment costs that the city has to pay the state can be reduced by reducing the amount of stormwater that gets in the system. And we do that with green infrastructure. So there's three main components that we're going to be installing through this project. The first is a bioretention basin, which are all the blue dots you see on the screen, stormwater tree planters, which are all the green dots, and subsurface infiltration trenches, which are all the pink dots. Each one's slightly different, more or less. They all sort of serve the same purpose. But I thought this was a pretty cool graphic to show you all where these will be located. And as we move into the next slide, I can kind of give you a brief explanation of what each one is. So again, all three of these, the intent of installing this green infrastructure is to reduce the amount of stormwater that enters the city system and increase the amount of stormwater that can be infiltrated back into the ground. Bioretention basins. So we actually started installing these on Somerville Ave. I believe there's 3 of them. We'll be installing 3 more on this project. The goal here, we use engineered media, different engineered soils that will take, surface runoff, stormwater. It infiltrates through this engineered soil. It cleans the water. It then allows it to infiltrate back into the ground. While at the same time, promoting the life of new plants. So it's kind of a win-win situation here. As you can see in this kind of rendering here, these are often installed in curb bump outs in the areas, between a sidewalk and a roadway, which is part of the goal. We want them to be able to capture runoff from both the road and the sidewalk. Subsurface infiltration tree trenches. This is another neat one that we actually don't have on Somerville Ave. This may be a first for the city here. These infiltration tree trenches allow for stormwater to come off the roadway, come off the sidewalk. It gets infiltrated back into the ground. It gets cleaned, but it also promotes new tree health and new tree growth. So like I mentioned, we're planting 185 new trees. These will certainly help those trees thrive. And the last one here, subsurface infiltration trenches, more or less the same concept. Oftentimes they're hidden. You don't know they're there. So as we kind of get further into slides, we have a breakdown of streets, and you'll see there's a column for utilities and a column for streetscape surface work. I listed all of these under utility work because they are buried, they're underground. You don't actually see them. But more or less these, same concept, right? We take stormwater runoff that's dirty in the roadway, dirty in the sidewalk. It infiltrates back into the ground. It reduces, all three of these actually reduce phosphorus. It's another big city goal of ours by implementing this new green stormwater infrastructure. I believe the metric is, if I'm not mistaken, the project is actually going to be filtering out 11 pounds of phosphorus. I forget if it's a 10-year storm or not, but they do have a significant impact. And we found that on Somerville Lab, these actually work, and we want to continue that forward through all our city projects. We'll get more into this in the fall, but this is a teaser for the future here. What you're looking at is a pretty neat rendering. Thank you, Stantec, of Summer Street at Quincy Street. We have the ability, for those that are familiar, that's a very wide intersection right there on Quincy Street. A lot of dead space. So we're actually going to convert that dead space of the roadway into a pocket park. We'll have porous pavers, new benches, new bike racks, trash, recycling facilities, a couple new trees you can see in the photo. And there's one of those bioretention basins right there. So in addition to taking this green stormwater infrastructure and building it into our new streets, we're actually reducing the width of Quincy Street to minimize the length of the crosswalk, so that pedestrians aren't, in a massive roadway crosswalk and wondering, how long is it going to take for me to cross this? So this is another city goal that we've been implementing with a lot of our city projects, in narrowing these side streets, minimizing the crosswalk length to improve pedestrian safety. Like I said, a lot of this will be happening in the fall, and more so next year in 2024, as we look to do surface work everywhere. And I don't know if this was the right place for it, but here it is. We want to celebrate bike lanes. We've had a lot of success on Somerville Ave with separated cycle tracks, both sides of the road. We're continuing that effort. So from the existing bike network we have from Union Square up Bow Street and Somerville Ave heading west towards Porter Square, we're actually going to be building a separated cycle track on Summer Street. That's going to extend from Bow Street all the way to Spring Street. On the north side of the road, the south side of the road is still going to be a shared road. We'll have sharrows painted on the ground for that eastbound lane heading towards Union Square. And Central Street, although Central Street's going to become a one-way travel lane northbound, we're going to have cycle tracks more or less at the same elevation as the sidewalk, separated from the roadway in both directions. I believe the right-hand side goes north and the left-hand side goes south. If I'm wrong, flip that. But it's just a continuation of trying to improve our bike network, improve our bike facilities, and create a safer corridor for cyclists. So really exciting stuff. Some of these Summer Street, for instance, this will be happening this year as we start our restoration work. And now we're going to move into a breakdown of work per street. We have every street listed. Shout out to Hersey Street residents. We didn't forget you this time. We do have a slide for you. Again, I won't go through every single slide. It's a lot of streets with a lot of information. For those who are interested, if I skip over your street, this will be posted. Feel free to go back to our city website after tonight's presentation and take a look. So for instance, Avon Street, these are all alphabetical order, by the way. On subsurface improvements, we've completed our sewer structures and our sewer pipes. We've completed our drainage structures and pipes. We've installed new water main and services. We have not yet constructed the subsurface infiltration trench. As I mentioned, that's going to be part of the surface work. And we have yet to line the sewers on Avon Street. Sewer lining is actually not very intrusive. It's 2 trucks set up at 2 manholes, so it's not a very big work zone. So even if we pave the road and we get to this after the fact, it's not going to create too much of a disturbance outside of maybe 1 day's worth of work. You'll notice in the top right, for each of these streets, we have an anticipated work schedule. We've updated this since last fall. Some of the dates have changed, but for each and every street, we've listed what we've received from our contractor and their critical path schedule. On streetscape improvements, new sidewalks, curb bump outs, I've spoken to that. I have listed here a new fire alarm pull box. For those of you who don't know, this goes back to the asbestos pipe that we removed. When we removed that, and it carried the electrical cable for the fire alarm, Somerville is one of the last communities in Massachusetts to still have pull boxes on the street. There's not too many places left that have this system in place. Ours still works very well. But when we remove that asbestos pipe, we removed with it the cable that goes for the fire alarm. We're going to be putting in a new fire alarm box that has wireless capabilities, so we can actually enter the 21st century here, which is a great improvement. And I think it's something, it's long overdue. Like I said, the system works fine, but if we have an opportunity to upgrade, we're certainly going to do that. For those who don't know, the Route 85 bus, actually part of its route is on Avon Street. So we're going to have a new bus stop at Central. We'll have new benches there. And some of the green infrastructure, we'll be doing our new trees, bioretention basin, a couple different planting areas. And the last thing I'll mention is for each of these streets, we've listed how many trees we've cut down, but we're also showing how many trees we're going to be putting back. And as we kind of progress here, I'll go very slowly so people can read each and every one. I won't speak to everyone, but there are a few that I've included photos of recent work, just to use as a kind of a quick reference and show you all what it looks like for us day to day. So here's Berkeley Street. Here's Cambria Street. Oh, excuse me, Carter Terrace. Central Street. And as you can see on Central Street under streetscape improvements, we have new separated porous cycle tracks, which is pretty exciting. Porous asphalt also allows for stormwater infiltration. It's a bit more expensive than regular hot mix asphalt, but water can actually go through it and get back into the ground. And some photos. So these photos were taken up by the intersection of Central and Highland, where we've spent a good portion of our winter here over the last few months. A couple of cool photos. On the left, you'll see it's actually that excavation was deep enough. We excavated around the gas main. That's that yellow pipe that you see. These gas mains are typically live. We've got to exercise extreme caution digging around them. But when we need to go beneath them, we have to figure out a way to support these pipes so they don't collapse. What our contractors managed to do here, there's call it an acronym, SOE, which stands for supportive excavation. And that relates to trench safety. So for an excavation like this, what they ended up doing is basically hammering in 4 large steel beams. You can see them in the corners. And then in between those, they've used steel plates and a combination of wooden planks, which we call lagging, to really shore up the sides of this trench while still supporting that gas main in place so that we could get underneath there and work on a new water main. On the right-hand side is just your typical drainage structure. You can see on the right, the water main is right up next to it. It's a black pipe. And again, this is another situation. You can see, the wooden lagging as they progress. We use a lot of stone bedding, and you can see all the workers that we have are within that wooden lagging, so they're safe. The trench won't collapse on them. So just a couple photos here of Central Street work. Moving on to Gibbons Street. Percy Street. One thing I do want to mention for those of you joining us from Hersey Street, because Hersey Street is actually a private way, we won't be constructing any sidewalks, really doing any surface work other than repaving the road when we're done with the new utilities, sewer, drain, and water. Highland Ave, just a note, we have two different slides because we've bisected Highland Ave at School Street. So this first one is Central Street to School Street. Work, as I mentioned, is wrapping up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll revert that section of Highland Ave back to two-way traffic, and take that current detour down. As a note, again, we don't have any streetscape component to this project for Highland Ave. However, if you are interested in learning more about this future Highland Ave streetscape improvement project, we encourage you to visit our website, our capital investment plan. The link is here for those who want to check this out later. You can click that link, or you can type that into your web browser and it'll give you more information about future projects over the next, I forget, 10 years, I think. So this 5 years, thank you. More information is available there in terms of what we're doing with the surface of Highland Ave. Couple of photos. One of the reasons we replace water mains is some of these water mains are 100 to 140 years old. Some of them go back to 1880, I believe. The photo on your left is a typical tuberculated water main. These are old cast iron, and it interacts with water for as long as it does. The diameter, the interior diameter gets smaller and smaller. There's a lot of pipes like this underground across the whole city. Our Stantec was able to determine which pipes are in desperate need of replacement, this being one of them, as you can tell. So we've actually replaced that with what you see on the right-hand side, a brand new ductile iron water main. Kind of yucky. Water's still safe to drink, but when you see a tuberculated pipe like this, it reduces fire suppression. So if you have a building that has sprinklers, obviously less water is going to be able to travel through that tuberculated pipe. You're going to have less pressure on your end as a homeowner or a renter or whomever. So this is a lot of exciting work. This is what's been happening on Highland Ave over the past few months. Moving on, this is a section of Highland Ave between School Street and Hamlet Street. Obviously, no work's taken place yet. We'll start this summer when school's out of session. Oxford Street, we're currently working on now. Got a couple of photos of work that's occurred here in the past week or two. So again, on the left-hand side, you'll see what a brand new water main pipe looks like. On the right-hand side, I chose this photo. It's pretty neat. What you can, if you can see it, we actually started installing a new drainage structure, a new manhole. A couple other things in this photo I want to point out. There's a couple utility crossings in this trench. There's one behind the arm of that excavator, which I believe is a water service. What looks like a wire in kind of the foreground here. In the very foreground is another one of those copper water services. So again, it's not very easy to start digging in the road and expect nothing to be in the way. It's almost the complete opposite. Every time a contractor in the city digs in the ground, they come across a slew of different utilities and have to exercise extreme caution so as not to damage them, to break them, etc. So this photo kind of captures what that challenge is like almost each and every day. School Street, which will be starting this spring. Summer Street, from Spring Street to School Street, where we've been working for the past year and a half. The other half of Summer Street from School Street to Bow, which will start this summer. Again, another neat feature I want to point out here, we looked at it earlier, is that pocket park at Quincy Street. We'll also have a separated cycle track on the north side of the road here. And lastly, Westwood Road. And now we're going to move into some frequently asked questions. What we've tried to do, we tend to get a lot of these questions from residents here. We try to memorialize them here on a slide. So many of you, if you have the same question, we can speak to it now. So in terms of water quality, what is a temporary water bypass? Why am I connected? For many of you, especially on School Street, who have seen now there's a pipe along the gutter line on the east side of School Street and a pipe at the back of sidewalk on the west side of School Street. What this essentially is a temporary water main. We install them, we put them on the ground and connect each home to this new bypass pipe so that we can drain the existing water main underground and remove and replace it. Once it gets replaced, we take this temporary bypass off the road and reconnect people to the brand new main underground. Another common question we've received is, when you're on water bypass, how does the city bill you for usage? Because oftentimes we need to bypass the meter. And by bypassing the meter, I mean, we connect you to the temporary bypass. If we can, if you have one, through a hose spigot outside, and we backfeed the house through the spigot. Many of you, I think, have asked for hose splitters. We're happy to accommodate that. Many of you who garden, wash your car, something like that. So for anyone who's connected to a bypass currently, or will be in the next coming weeks, and we're able to run this blue hose to your water spigot, if you need a splitter and you want to use the water outside, feel free to reach out to us. We'll have our contractor come install one. So back to your water bill. Because we bypass the meter and connect to the hose spigot on the exterior of your home, oftentimes we bypass the water meter. What the water department has done and what we've been informed of is they'll refer back to the previous year's usage bill. So for instance, we're now in the month of April. You're connected to bypass, we've circumvented your water meter. They'll go back to April of 2022, determine what your water usage is, how much your bill was, and estimate for this month and this year. When you're off bypass and you're now reconnected to the water main and we've connected you back to your water meter, the water department typically comes back, makes adjustments to your bill, whether that's a credit back to you if they overcharge you in their estimate, or they'll basically prorate your usage once you're back connected to the water main. As always, obviously we don't handle billing here in the engineering department. We manage the contractors and the construction. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to the water department. I'm sure they can speak more to how they bill you than we can right now, but that's the general gist of it. Sanitary sewer services and connections. Another, couple of common questions we get. Will my sewer service connection, your sewer lateral from your home to the sewer main, will that be replaced? More often than not, the answer is no. We're able to kind of intercept your sewer lateral when we replace the main and reconnect it. Certainly, and as some of you may know, there are times when we damage your lateral. There's certainly been instances of folks having sewer backups as a result of this. Certainly not what we aim for. So like I said, oftentimes we try not to replace these. If we do end up damaging it, or we need to remove a section of it in order to accommodate, a water main or a drain line or a catch basin, we will then go replace it to the back of sidewalk. We typically don't go up to the building through the property. So that kind of answers question number 2. How much of the sewer service is the city responsible for? Typically, the city's responsible from the main to the property line. So that includes roadway and sidewalk. The homeowner is then responsible for property line to the building. And lastly, I hate to admit it, this has happened, more times than I'd like to admit here. There's been a handful of folks in the SpringHill neighborhood who unfortunately have had a sewer backup. If that happens and you believe it's a result of the construction, certainly we want to know about it. We're going to tell our contractor, if we hear from you that you've got a backup or your toilet's not flushing, we'll send our contractor over to make any and all repairs. If for some reason, as a homeowner, you decide to call a plumber or a different drain layer, and you've incurred these costs to fix your internal plumbing, your sewer connection, we also want to hear about that, because there is a certain claims process that each and every one of you can go through if that is the case.
I would say give us a call first. reach out to us first before you do anything. We can give you some advice, either it could be
Yeah.
something quick that our contractor can just run out there and take care of, like something like that today, or it could be something that we need to get a different contractor involved. But reach out to us. We'll talk more about how you can reach out to us in the next couple slides.
Yep. So on that note, thank you, Jesse. I'm going to pass it over to Nick. Nick's going to kind of mention how you all can stay informed with our day-to-day operations here. So Nick, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Dan. And I realize this information by this point is probably old hat for a lot of you folks in the neighborhood that have been living through this work over the last year plus. But for folks who may be newer to the neighborhood or new to our meeting, just wanted to point out a couple of channels that we use to keep folks updated. The first is Somerville City Alerts. This is the citywide alert system that we use to notify folks of construction in their neighborhoods, or emergencies, other kind of public information that we want to get out to residents. A lot of folks in the neighborhood have probably received calls recently about the connection to the temporary water bypass that Ann was just talking about. So we try to send out information on those construction activities in neighborhoods via that channel. The next channel I want to point out to you is we do have a dedicated project page for this. We do try to post periodic progress reports and updates there. It's like also a repository for the presentations and the recordings of all our public meetings. So if you're like interested in reviewing something we talked about on this call or even in previous meetings, everything is available at that SomervilleMA.gov/SpringHill site. So that's definitely a great resource to check out periodically. And prior to jumping to Q&A, just wanted to provide some contact information for everyone as well. Definitely the best way to get in touch with us about anything related to this project or really any construction throughout the city that's being run by the engineering department is this construction@SomervilleMA.gov email address. And Jesse and I are all copied on that, as well as some of our colleagues in the engineering division. Definitely the best way to bring an issue or any questions to our attention. Also have included our personal emails and work phones as well. If you ever need to reach out directly, we're also available to discuss anything related to the project. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back to Jesse, who I think is going to start our Q&A.
Please.
Where is it, Dan?
I was going to say, please give everyone a quick teaser on what to expect this fall.
Sure. I'm a big Marvel movie fan, so I like to have that little teaser at the end. So when we talk again in the fall, we're going to be focused more on surface restoration and mobility improvements along Summer and Central Street, which we already kind of touched upon. It's a pretty exciting part of this project. So now we're going to go to question and answers. I see a lot of people that ask questions throughout, but I want people to raise hands. Let's have a conversation. So raise your hands. We will call your name. Nick will unmute you after I call your name. You will ask your question and we will have a conversation about it. Also, if you want to use this time to talk about last night's episode of Secession, I have no problem with that either. All right, let's see who's first. Salvatore Solari has had his hand raised for a while now. Nick, if you wouldn't mind unmuting him.
Salvatore, you should be able to.
Hey, thank you guys. So I just was curious the likelihood that you guys will come under budget on this this whole proposal here. And second part to it is if you guys were to get rid of all the bump outs and the bike lanes and everything else like that, would it be easier to come in under budget without replacing the trees that you cut down or adding new ones? Just replace the ones that you're going to cut down anyways. So the kind of three-part question. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So basically you're asking if the scope of this project was different, would it cost different?
My question to you is if we cut that stuff out, could we make it come under budget? I know you guys are getting close to being at you're at $8 million, have your 24 and just only a third of the way through.
Sure. So the project was bid with a design plan, and the cost was associated with that design, which include everything we just went over. So there's not cutting stuff out of this project. This is what has been agreed to by our contractor to do the work. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that's fine, I guess. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Salvatore. All right, next is Chris Ilk. I apologize if I mispronounced that.
No, it's fine. It's ill. So this is kind of a specific question, but I'd say, and also thank you for the presentations. This is great. We understand how much trouble all this work is, but I'd say maybe a dozen times over the last couple months, the traffic light on Summer Street and School Street has been out. And I don't know if it seems like it's construction related or to help with traffic, but it creates a really unsafe condition for anyone trying to cross that intersection. Is that something that's done as a traffic easing measure? Because it seems like that's the intent. And if you stand there in the morning, you see a ton of kids try to cross that street on the way to school, and it causes a real kind of hazardous situation for them.
Chris, we definitely appreciate that feedback. That light was put on flashing at certain times to pull traffic through down School Street from Highland to get through that intersection. But the good news is the Highland Ave construction wrapping up next couple of weeks. We will not have to use that measure anymore.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's being done at prime kids walking to school location, and they don't get a walk sign. And if you stand there, cars just fly through the yellow light, and it's not a great measure for anyone who has to actually safely cross that street, especially like smaller kids.
Sure. Normally we do have a detail officer stationed there. So
I cross that intersection every morning. I've never once seen an officer actually at that intersection.
Okay.
So this is more just for feedback for future instances like this. I realize these things have to happen, but if there's going to be a detail officer, it'd be really helpful if they were actually at the point of that kind of dangerous situation.
Yeah, Chris, we will definitely look into that going forward. Thank you for that feedback.
Sure,
I may just
thanks.
quickly add on to this too, Chris, while you're still here. Matter of fact, just thinking of police details, from time to time, occasionally the police will actually turn the lights on flashing. Obviously, it's not something we condone. However, when they're out there, they're kind of the authority on roadway safety for every type of user. Our contractor, I believe, we've been pretty consistent in getting, at least 6 details every day. Obviously, we're going to need, as many, if not a few more, as we get into the spring kind of construction season here. We can follow up with Somerville Police and talk to a couple of the police captains who work with the detail office to ensure that, if we have a detail available, we can put them at that intersection to make crossing safer. So we
it's really just during those prime, on the way to school, on the way home from school,
Sure.
Those 2.5 hours, let's say. The rest of the
Mhm.
time it's going to be pretty low traffic in terms of pedestrians, but it just, it's we don't want this to end with, something that none of us want to have happen, right? Some kid gets hit by a car or something. So that's all.
Yep. Well, no, thank you for the feedback too. We do appreciate it, and we'll certainly follow up on that and try to make that improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next up will be Corey King. Hi, Corey.
Hey, Jesse, to say, yes, Succession did not disappoint last night. But anyway, I know that you and I have spoken. I live here on Central and Highland at that intersection that we've had so much fun over the last few years, but I just wanted to double check on what the timeline was now here for this last piece that they're doing right here at the intersection of Central and Highland. Just because I had been told originally it was only going to be another week or so, and now they've put up signs for no parking until the end of April. So I was just wanting a timeline for that.
I can actually speak to that, Jesse, if you don't mind.
Yeah, share our schedule.
Great. So Corey, I'm glad you brought this question up because we actually discussed this in a progress meeting with our contractor last Thursday. So every week they send us a 3-week look ahead schedule, and they show the work there. This is Central at Highland, wrapping up. I believe is it the 24th? Excuse me, the 21st. So that's two weeks, end of next week.
Okay. That's helpful. And then just to give the feedback again, I know Jesse, you and I had a phone call about it before, is that it is really hit and miss how many times that they do not tamper down the steel plates that are on the road. Like there's no, asphalt that's put around the edges at all to tamper down. And this weekend, again, it was none at all. And I saw so many close calls of those plates flipping up and just being horribly loud in general, but it's more about safety. And it seems like every time I say that it's not doing, they'll do it for one day and then not again after just once being told.
We will speak to our contractor tomorrow about that.
Yeah, they did, of course, conveniently today before community meeting of things, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that I mean, I appreciate you guys telling them that. And it seems like the ones that it's been communicated in the one day they do, and then subsequent days, no.
Thank you, Corey.
But thank you guys so much for all this work. Really appreciate your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, Nick. Next up will be Jeff Watermain.
Whiteman.
I would not have guessed that.
No, the E makes the E makes the A long.
How are you,
So-
Jeff?
So hi, so I have a question about the traffic mitigation when you make Central one-way north. So when you had closed Central before, it made Benton Road a nightmare because that's two-way and really only one travel lane. So have you guys thought about how you're going to change the traffic patterns to accommodate Central one-way north? Hello?
You want to speak to that, Dan?
Yep. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Thank you for this question, and agree that, 2 lanes of traffic on Benton Road with two lanes of parking is not ideal. Personally, I've driven Benton Road, and had issues trying to get from Highland down to Summer Street because there's traffic coming at you from the other direction, and you've got to kind of pull over and the car goes by, etc. I know during design, a lot of community outreach, a lot of interdepartmental coordination occurred with our mobility department about converting Central Street to one-way as a more or less a continuation of Central Street one-way coming up from Somerville Avenue. With the intent that, we by eliminating that southbound lane, you've got a more now continuous Central Street heading up to Highland. And inversely, on the other side to the east is School Street heading all the way south. I don't know off the top of my head what traffic studies have been performed. I know they have been performed. I don't remember exactly what the results were, but I do know that they were, the results weren't problematic in the sense of creating, logjam traffic when you convert Central Street to one-way northbound. Let me follow up on that because I want to give you a better answer than what I just gave you, and unfortunately I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, right. Thank you. Because I live on Cambria Street, so I normally, if I came from the north, I would have taken Central South, but now I'll do School Street when they change that. But when I exit Cambria, I have to exit onto Benton Road. So I think it would be best if you made Benton Road one-way north, so it wouldn't take all that southbound traffic.
So,
Just a suggestion.
yeah, Jeff, that's been something that's been proposed, I think, by the city councilor to start with. Benjamin Campen has brought that up. I think our mobility team is looking into it. I don't have a specific date of when the traffic study would begin, but that is what would be needed to figure out the logistics behind that. But it certainly does make a lot of sense, but it is not part of this project. But it is something that will definitely be looked at as we holistically look at the neighborhood and traffic going forward.
Okay, thanks.
And I will say, just very quick, tagging on to that, because we're talking about Benton Road, I know there's a few comments in the chat here about whether Benton is included in the project. For those of you who wrote in the chat inquiring about Benton Road, unfortunately, no, Benton Road is not part of the scope of work. This project is actually considered, call it phase 1 of the SpringHill sewer separation. Phase 2 kind of picks up with Benton Road being the eastern limit and kind of carryovers to the west. That's another project that has yet to enter the design phase, just like the Highland Ave Streetscape project. But I do want to mention to those who are inquiring, Benton Road is not part of this project, sadly.
All right, well, thank you, Jeff. Next question is going to be from Matthew Goss.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. I had a question about, I know you introduced the surface improvements generally, but you didn't really explicitly talk about actually repaving. I just bike every day, so it's rather bumpy surface right now. I was just kind of wondering on the schedule of repaving Summer Street and Central Street particularly.
So matter of fact, Matthew, every street within the project limits, with the exception of Highland Avenue. We're actually repaving Summer Street, Central Street, Avon, Berkeley, Oxford, Hersey, Cambria, Westwood, Gibbons. So at the end of this project, what our goal is here, I think portion of Summer Street, because of the condition it's in, we're going to be doing some full depth roadway reconstruction, which involves basically trucking in dense graded gravel and kind of building the roadway from the ground up. Almost every other street, we're going to be milling the pavement down 2 to 3 inches and repaving over that. So to kind of get back to your question, and when will this happen? Chances are Summer Street from Spring to School Street, we are looking to see if we can get that paved towards the end of summer. And Central Street likely won't be repaved until next year.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. Next up will be Ben Horgan. Hey, Ben.
Hey guys, am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Hopefully this is a quick question. Just wanted to see if you could clarify or expand upon the bike lane that will be in Summer Street. Does that mean that parking on the south side will be removed, or how do you think you'll be able to fit that in there?
Your inclination or assumption rather is correct. By building a separated cycle track, which is going to be at the same elevation as the sidewalk off the roadway, obviously that's going to take up more roadway space than what you see now. I forget the total number, but we will need to, especially between School Street and Bow Street, I think we're removing roughly 21 parking spots on the south side of Summer Street in order to accommodate that bike lane.
Cool, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Up next is going to be Nick B. I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Hey, Nick.
Hey, I'm curious about how some of the bus stops on Summer Street mesh with the current plan that the MBTA is going through with changing bus routes, including removing 85.
Tempted to say you're not alone. So we've actually, Jesse and I had a meeting. This is a great question. It's a question we asked ourselves quite a bit here, especially last year when they came out with their network.
I'm going to mute myself. Sorry. I have a helper.
No worries. I've got one too somewhere behind me. So we, when this project was designed, there was never a discussion up until that point back in 2019, early 2020 about the disappearance of the 85 route. So we actually, especially on Summer Street, through the design phase, started incorporating floating bus stops. So that the bus stop, if you're at the back of sidewalk, you'd have sidewalk, bike lane, and then it's almost like a bump out specifically for the bus as a bus stop. In all of our conversations with the T, they've never committed to removing the 85 because we had asked, if we're going to start building these floating bus stops, certainly we don't want to spend the money to construct something that's not going to be of use if the 85 disappears. Jesse and I had a conversation. I still don't think the MBTA has ever issued anything formal about it. But it sounds like in our regular coordination with the T, they seem to indicate there was enough call it public backlash about the potential removal of the 85 that it sounds like they're planning on keeping it. Certainly, I don't want to speak on behalf of the MBTA, but that's kind of the word we heard through the grapevine is that enough residents were concerned about the disappearance that they're having kind of second thoughts on it and want to retain the 85. And certainly we want to construct these floating bus stops and have the 85 continue its service through the neighborhood.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, we hate to see the 85 go away, first of all, right?
There we go.
Yep. We're all on the same page.
Another satisfied customer. Thank you, Nick. Up next is going to be Jeremy Kessler.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yep.
Hi, I've got a question about you. I'm on Oxford Street, and you gave a timeline for Oxford was among the ones where you said the utility work is happening this year, but then the surface work is happening next spring. So my question is two pieces. First is when do you expect to complete this year's portion of the work on Oxford Street so that, for example, and when will I no longer be on the alternate water source? And the second piece is what will the street look like between when you complete the utility work underground and then pause for the winter before doing the streetscape?
All right, Jeremy, thank you. Great questions. I guess the answer to your first question about when will you be disconnected from the water bypass? Given the length of Oxford Street, I think that the current schedule shows the new water main being installed mid-April now, so through the end of May. In theory, I think you should be off that bypass. So it's about another 4 to 6 weeks for them to get that new water main in. Once that's installed, they test it, they chlorinate it, assuming it passes all of these tests, they energize it, you're reconnected. So about, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks, we should have that water main in the ground. And then you're off that bypass. To answer your second question about what is it going to look like between now and next year? I know I understand right now it's a good portion of the street is gravel. Obviously, our contractor needs to continue with dust control, especially as we get into warmer weather, like Thursday and Friday of this week, if you can believe it. But when they have a significant portion of the street, kind of torn up, we're going to actually require them to come back and pave all their trenches and street sweep and clean up all their equipment and all the stone and everything like that. So going into winter, fall and winter, the street is going to be, it'll have asphalt. It's certainly going to be bumpy because it's not going to be, paved curb to curb like we will be doing next year. But we won't leave it in the condition that you're used to seeing now. So I hope that answers your question. Questions?
It sounds like it mostly does. So I just wanted to hear the curb to curb and a little bit of when things are left in a certain state, you would then require. It sounds like what you're saying is that we're going to get temporary repaving and it's not going to look finally finished, but we're not going to be left with gravel road. Like the east end of Oxford Street right now is pretty darn terrible.
Right. Correct. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, we'll make sure the road is paved so you don't have gravel kicking around and there's not dust. And it's probably going to sit like that through the winter, allow the trenches to settle a little bit, especially as we get into kind of freezing subsurface temperatures, right? When the ground freezes, it's going to heave, it's going to settle. And then next spring, we're going to come back, mill the road, grind the roadway down 3 inches, and then resurface the whole thing next year.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy. Next up is Anketa. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hello.
Hi, can you guys hear me now? Yeah, sorry, it took me a while to figure out. Yeah, so first comment was I wanted to just double click on the comment that came earlier about Benton Road. Just not to beat any horses, but just as someone who lives on the corner of Benton, so even though there's no work happening on my street, which is actually not true because there's plenty of gas work happening on my street, I get all the joys of everything happening on the ends of my street. So again, so it's not the greatest news to hear that this will be happening to me again in the future, whenever Benton Road is done. But as much as possible, if like consideration can be taken for a street that is not technically part of the project, but is still getting a lot of the pain. So things like Central Street becoming one way or closed, or just all of the madness happening on Summer and Highland, if, consideration can be taken for those residents that are on adjacent streets when it comes to traffic management, when it comes to noise management, when it comes to all of the crazy detours, that would be appreciated. The second question I had was just if there is a way, speaking of all of the detours, is there somewhere in real time where a resident can look up which roads are closed at any given time? Because at least, last fall and continuing honestly even till now in the spring, it's a little bit of a guessing game every day as to what route will actually get me from my home to Cambridge where I work. Is there a way to know in real time where that is? And related to that, when water mains are being shut down or fire hydrants are being flushed, which I know that is a totally separate thing. Usually there are notifications that come out through the alert system, but that doesn't always seem to happen. And as an example, there was just a couple weeks ago where I got notice of a water main shut off that would be happening on Tuesday, but that notification came to me at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, about 9 a.m. on Tuesday. So, clearly there's glitches in the system. So just, that's a lot. I'm sorry, I started ranting, but any feedback you have on that would be appreciated.
Sure. Well, we definitely spoke about Benton Road earlier, and we do have the city council and the mobility team looking into that for the long-term solution. C2Y calls, Nick is in charge of that. He's getting them out. We'll make sure that, we try and get them out, if it's a non-emergency, at least 48 hours in advance, especially if it's a water shutdown, so people can kind of plan their lives. And for a long-term map, Nick, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, this is kind of a problem that we're trying to address currently, something that can keep up with the dynamic nature of the closures in the neighborhood, both closures that are a result of the city's work on this project or a result of Eversource Gas closing Summer Street further down towards Seattle Park. So this is very much an issue that we're trying to solve for the community, like looking into a dynamic construction app that shows where work is ongoing in the city and where closures will be in place. I don't have a timeline for when that will be available, but just want to bring it up because we definitely understand that that is a challenge for the community. It's a challenge for us to figure out a solution for it, given the dynamic nature of some of those closures, but we are definitely trying to take on that problem and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. And as a kind of related follow-up, is there, and maybe this is just my being naive to this, is there somewhere that we can look up just all the projects that are happening in our area? Because, obviously some of them are city related, some of them are Eversource and the utility company, some maybe it's just some businesses construction. And so obviously these aren't all coming under your department, but is there like a consolidated list like that somewhere?
Yeah, I can speak to that one as well. So the best place for that is our construction page on the website, and I'll drop that in the chat as well after this. But that's SomervilleMA.gov/construction. We try to consolidate all of the various project pages for city construction work going on, where we have like project specific updates available. We do try to also include any work that's being done by either like Eversource or National Grid in the given construction season. Ideally, we want people to be able to go to that page if they see work going on their street or in the neighborhood and be able to identify who's doing the work and why. We don't cover everything. Like, for instance, we don't cover private constructions on certain buildings. Sorry, we don't cover a lot of private development construction projects that may have some work in the right of way, but that's always something we're trying to look to add. So definitely recommend that as a source for like all city construction projects. And in the future, that would be the place where we would eventually put that sort of dynamic city construction map.
Cool, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. All right, up next is Stephanie. Nick, are you able to unmute Stephanie?
Stephanie, you should now be able to unmute.
Now?
Yep,
Can
we
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you.
Okay, great. I was just calling to ask about plans for rerouting pedestrian traffic during construction. Will there be safe routes for them to take when sidewalks are closed?
So when we close sidewalks to, create new ones, we make a point of only doing one side of the road at a time. So therefore you can cross the other side of the street.
Mm-hmm. And will that be marked, before you are at a place where you'd have to cross without a curb cut, for example?
Yeah, so we will have, the contractors have to put up signs, a block ahead of to say, sidewalk closed, cross here, then the sign will be located at the nearest curb cut.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem, Stephanie. All right, up next is Brenton.
Brenton, you should be able to go ahead and unmute.
Yes, hi. I just threw it in the chat. Just want to know what the routing situation is going to look like for Oxford, because it's a one-way, and I noticed that you said that you were going to close School Street for a long amount of time, and a lot of my neighbors and I have been going the wrong way to get to the east side, and that's cool for a little bit. I don't know what the plan is going to be, depending on how long, like the long-term plan is, depending on how long School Street's going to be shut down. If you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Sure. So what you're doing in Oxford is correct. I've talked to a few of your neighbors about that as well. We don't have signs up saying that you can do that in Oxford because we don't want non-residents of Oxford to be doing that move. If you live on the street and you know the traffic of the street, you can drive very slowly to get to your driveway or your parking spot. When School Street is closed, we will allow, at least when we're, at the lower end, because when we do School Street, we're going to start at Summer and work up the Highland. So you will have access to Oxford for at least a little bit. Once we get to the point where we're doing utilities right in that intersection of Oxford and School, you can do that same maneuver of going the wrong way down Oxford.
And then lastly, because my kids are some of them, there are quite a few children who play outside, and they've been cautious lately because of the big construction vehicles. But when I look at the timeline that you presented, it seems like there's going to be like this awkward stage in the summertime where it might be paved over, it might not, we might have roads closed off. What are we, and some other folks spoke to this as well, just around like safety in general, because I don't necessarily want to limit my kids being able to go outside, as well as to navigate the streets safely. Do you have any talking points to that as well?
Sure. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, right now, Oxford Street is very much an active construction site, and I don't know if I would send kids out to be near that. But we're in the process of moving from school to central, and as we make progress, the street will become more available and cleaner, and more you can go outside.
Yeah, and Brenton, just to tag on to that too, I think I mentioned it earlier. As we progress with our work, our contractor is going to be temporarily paving Oxford Street, and especially as they get closer to finishing their sewer drain with water work on the street. as they kind of fill in these trenches, right? Currently, it's a good portion of Oxford Street is gravel. Before they call it demobilize and move to a different street, they're going to have to go up and down the street, temporarily pave all these gravel trenches, and once that's done, go over the road and sidewalks with street sweepers, brooms, what have you. And essentially try to return Oxford Street back to its kind of a pre-construction condition, so that you're not having to live through what the street looks like now every day until next year. So in the next few months, as that the work kind of wraps up here towards the end of May, early June, I foresee, kind of early midsummer, Oxford Street, there's no work going on, there's no equipment, no loose stones in the road. All the trenches are kind of paved over at that point. It's not going to look pretty per se, but it's certainly going to be as close to normal as we can make it in the interim until we come pave it next year.
Thank you.
All right, guys, it is close to 7:30. We're going to take one last question, and it's going to be from Joel Bennett. Nick, can you unmute Joel for us?
Yep. Joel, you should be able to unmute now.
Hey, how you all doing?
Good, Joel. How are you?
Good. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll limit them. I think I can maybe send an email or something. I mentioned this the last time, last meeting. I would like to see more cleaning during the process. I feel like the whole area is just constantly, gravel and stuff all over, even on Summer Street, because the asphalts, the patches are degrading, and I just think it would be a good quality of life, and I think it would also be good for stormwater management practices. There's a specific site that's really bad, which relates to both the gas work on Summer Street and some to the sewer separation, which is at School and Summer, the old gas station. That site is just a mess, and it's—
Oh, just to jump in, that's not part of this project at all.
Well, it is, in the sense that the water lines that are coming down have to be kind of almost in the middle of the sidewalk, because the construction fences are far out. There's crap on the side. I mean, that's Feeney, right? That's the gas.
No. That's what I'm saying. That's a private construction at 73 Summer. That's not part of this, that we don't manage.
Well, Feeney is using it to stage. So that whole area has staging for, I believe it's Feeney. So if you could look into that, and even if it's not them, if you could look into it, because that site is just, it's just a mess. And so that would be nice. And then a question I have is, I'm actually a little confused at the whole stormwater separation piece. So basically, what happens to the stormwater, the sewers that are now separated from the sewage? Where does that water go?
So when the stormwater, we put in all this new drainage, right?
Yep.
When the stormwater kind of follows its new drainage route, now it's separated from sanitary flows. As I mentioned, MWRA, they treat our sanitary flows.
Yeah.
As it kind of travels from SpringHill neighborhood down to Somerville Ave, part of the Somerville Ave project has a brand new stormwater box culvert. It's 14 feet wide, 6 feet tall, almost big enough to drive a car through under Somerville Ave. That culvert itself, extending from Union Square down to McGrath Highway, it can act as a storage tank and hold 800,000 gallons a day, or excuse me, not a day. It can hold 800,000 gallons of stormwater. From there, that can also travel to the MWRA, where there's I think it's Deer Island has an outfall that basically that's stormwater, since it doesn't need to be treated. Nearly, to the extent that our sanitary flows do. There's different ways that, can enter back into a natural body of water when we have these overflow conditions during heavy storm events. So that's kind of the penultimate point where this all of these flows travel is to Deer Island. Some of it enters, I believe the MWA has MBTA has their own collector pipe down kind of by McGrath Highway. And furthermore, we plan at Poplar Street, number 10 Poplar Street. We're going to be building a pump station there. And that lot on the corner of Poplar Street and McGrath, the couple of northbound lanes there, that's going to have another gigantic storage tank there. So we can really kind of store all this water between the culvert and this future pump station tank, and really reduce the amount that gets treated by the state and charged back to the city.
Cool. That's so we're still, even though like that's happening, it's not like we still want to like be dumping a lot of water. Like as I noticed, because I was thinking, well, why do all this green infrastructure if we're finally separating it? We still want to deal with water where it lands, right?
Right. We do, and to the extent possible, right? Certainly, if we allow too much water to kind of infiltrate back into the ground, raises could potentially raise groundwater table, and as kind of lower Somerville and Union Square area has been prone to flooding. Severe flooding for a long time. So while we obviously don't want to relive those experiences of these kind of localized floods in these neighborhoods, by building all this other infrastructure kind of further east, Somerville Ave and Poplar Street, we can retain all that in storage tanks.
Yeah. But it's a good idea for people to still like be using like rain barrels and
of course. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But certainly there's just about anywhere where we can. Of course, there's I don't know how many limitations in building this green stormwater infrastructure. There's mature trees, hydrants, things like that. But anywhere where we're able to put these different features in, we certainly are going to do so and continue to do so.
Okay, cool. I'll just ask one more question. Well, actually related to, when does that actual kind of hookup happen? Like, is that down the road, or is it already happening that these waters are separated and we're kind of doing the right thing?
So that's actually already happening.
It is.
And kind of each street we start building new drains and new manholes and catch basins. It's just a continuation of that currently happening. And because the Somerville Ave project's nearly complete, just to kind of give you an update on that, we finished our culvert. So as soon as these flows hit Union Square, if they're not already separated further up in the SpringHill neighborhood, at Union Square they get separated and the sanitary flows continue. And we're already storing this water under Somerville Ave.
Okay, great.
And just to jump in quickly, Joel and anyone else, if you're interested, I dropped in the chat our project page for the Poplar Street pump station. We just had a construction kickoff meeting for that call as well. And at the beginning of that meeting, there's a great introduction into some of these kind of actions between the various projects that Anne is talking about here in terms of our SpringHill work connecting to the Somerville Ave work, ultimately connecting to the Poplar Street pump station that's going to be breaking ground this season.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Joel. We're gonna take one last question. She's been kind of waiting for a while. We're gonna have to talk to Angela real quick. Nick, if you can unmute her.
Angela, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so my husband and I have been listening in, and we are invested homeowners in Somerville on Highland Ave, 18 to 37 years respectively. So I do have several questions. I wasn't sure when you're coming down towards Highland Ave to the end of Benton Road, which impacts the previous woman that was talking about that. I was just curious when you're coming down like my neck of the woods.
Sure, Angela, that's a good question. Our limits of work stop at Central Street on Highland Ave. So that would be part of phase 2, which is another, you have to go through design and kickoff. So it's many years away.
Okay, all right, perfect. Now, one thing it's wonderful we're planting trees. However, by living here, I've seen how trees have uprooted our sidewalks. So I think of people with impaired mobility, people in wheelchairs, the elderly walking, when those have uplifted our sidewalks. I'm not sure if anything can be done to prevent that, or.
I can speak to this. So Angela, it's my understanding, and I think someone actually, Seth Hurwitz may have asked this in the chat earlier, what size trees are we planting? So when we come to plant all these trees, they're all going to be a 3-inch caliper tree. So, a couple inches like that. I believe, and I'll double check for you, if you wouldn't mind emailing us, if you could, just so I have a way to get back in touch with you and I can follow up with you on this. But I believe the species of trees that we're planting, for the most part, were selected between folks in our public space and urban forestry department and our design sub-consultant Hatch. So they're the species of trees that we're going to be planting are more inclined, the roots grow down instead of outward, as a method to try to eliminate the risk of these roots upheaving sidewalks.
I'm going to echo my concerns too about the traffic flow living on Highland Ave, and we're making one-way streets. I just want to make sure that we're really thinking of an all-inclusive Somerville when we are thinking of making one-way streets and doing all these revisions. The traffic is pretty tough right now with the construction. I get it, but when they formally make them one-way streets, I really hope that the mobility or whatever committee looks at that is looking at the whole impact to be an all-inclusive Somerville. And then my last question is, as you know, we have a big rodent and rat problem. I was curious if that had stirred up a lot of that problem that you've seen.
Sure, Angela. So our contractor Geoso is required to bait the construction areas, and we get reports from them, and we have not seen any sort of uptick related to construction. That being said, we had a pretty mild winter. And when you have a pretty mild winter, it will increase the rat population. So it could be a very rat-filled summer, but I wouldn't say it's because of construction, just because of seasonal change.
Okay. Thank you. This was really great. This was the first time I actually listened to this. I wasn't aware of these type of meetings, but very informative. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Angela. And with that, that is our last question. Dan, can you go back to our contact page?
I was just going to say, yep. And Angela, if you happen to notice, if you see just in your daily life kind of an uptick in rat sightings, we want to know about it, right? So as Jesse mentioned, our contractors are required to bait, and they come out every week to basically replace these traps, these bait traps. Like I said earlier in the presentation, we're not there every day, so because we're not there, we don't see it all the time as you would as a resident.
Right.
So certainly if you happen to see, it's becoming a problem, we want to know about it. So please, if you can see the screen, here's all our contact information. Reach out to us, give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'll respond accordingly.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys very much.
Sure. And before we break, I just want to say, I think Thomas Bent in the chat, and this is a question that, the answer is going to apply to everyone here. Looking for access to this recording and when will it be available? So on our city webpage, SomervilleMA.gov / I believe is it SpringHill Sewer, Nick?
It's just SpringHill,
Just SpringHill.
For the shortened link.
Thank you. So SomervilleMA.gov / SpringHill. That's our project website. And for those who are interested in viewing this after the fact, or want to hear these questions or hear our presentation again, this will get posted, I believe it's probably a couple days, right, before it's up online. This will be posted up online on that webpage. And if you scroll down on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a section called, I think it's called Community Meetings. We also have our first and second presentations there for viewing. This will be added to that.
It's like a trilogy.
But what happens when we come back in the fall, Jesse, for number 4?
Uh-oh. Rocky 4.
So again, just a reminder, as long as this construction project's ongoing through next year, we're going to come back in the fall. We'll be back a year from now to keep providing updates, kind of giving you a status update, letting you know what's been done to date, etc. So in the fall, we'll focus more on actual streetscape. I know with a lot of concerns about traffic, we do have a lot of speed humps and bump outs that are going to help kind of mitigate fast driving. I don't want to necessarily speak to the volume of vehicles, but in terms of people's driving behaviors, we want to put all this traffic calming and mitigation features in, and we'll speak a lot more about that in about 6 months from now, next October, November timeframe.
All right, well, that will be it for this evening. We want to thank you all for joining us. As we said, you can always reach out to us. That's my cell phone number, the Twitter address. I run the city's Twitter account for infrastructure. Feel free to tweet at me. Until we talk again, thank you all. Good night.
Thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.